Mino Line Media presents the Business First Podcast.
Hi, all, and welcome to a new episode of Business First with Sonia Aline. I am your host, and today we are really excited to have Tara DeVeaux in the studio with us. She is the new CEO, Chief Executive Officer of Burrell Communications Group. And why that is important and exciting is Tara herself is an award-winning marketer, and she is now joined not only an award-winning agency, but it is the oldest Black agency in the U.S., and it is currently the largest agency that specializes in marketing to diverse audiences. And so we were really happy to have you here, Tara, to talk about why this is such a big deal, a reason to celebrate, and to see the importance of and the strength of Black businesses, that Black businesses can endure, that they can have succession plans, that they can advance, and that they can still have presence and resonance in today's society. So congratulations, first of all. This is a huge deal. We're all really excited for you. And I'm excited to hear your response and your excitement around this new appointment.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for the support and the excitement. I am truly excited. It has been 9 weeks today, I think,
Wow.
since the changeover in ownership for Burrell. I have jumped right in with both feet because it is, Burrell was founded the year I was born. I was an advertising major in undergrad and learned about the existence of Black agencies. And I know that I would not be an award-winning marketer were it not for Tom Burrell. I wouldn't even have had the opportunity. So the idea of now leading the company that was founded by him is just, it's an emotional time. It's an exciting time, and I'm really glad to be here and to be leading this team.
Wow. And based on your background, you are the perfect person to lead this team. You have an extensive background in media, all areas of media. And I was listening to a recording that you had done, it might have been late last year, but it was before this, obviously. And I loved what you said. You said you create environments where creativity can be inspired. And that's so important because many of our listeners who are building organizations or building companies, of course, had been sparked by the creativity, right? And many of us have ideas. But you went on to say that what's important about these ideas is that they actually get executed and they get delivered. And so I wanted you to elaborate a little bit on what allowed you to understand the importance of, and what are some of the tools that you use to actually execute on these ideas, whether it's for yourself or whether you're mentoring or speaking to other people who want to do the same thing?
Yeah. I went into advertising. I wanted to be an actress. I went to college and I was like, I'm going to be an actor. So that was what my journey was. And my parents said, you need to come out of here after 4 years with a job. So you need to figure out how are you going to support yourself? How are you going to get, how Black families are. It's like, how are you going to get these benefits? I don't think you're going to get these benefits being an actress. And so, I really went to find, career counseling and all that kind of stuff in college and was interested in a career that enabled me to be creative. I was writing a lot at the time, journaling, creative writing, that kind of thing. But also enabled me to work with teams and it was a time for me to figure out what it was that I really enjoyed doing. And advertising, on literally every test that I took, advertising popped up. And so I knew that was my path, but I didn't know where exactly I was going to fall within an agency structure or a client structure for that matter. But as I got started, I found that what I really loved was making creative things come to life. I wasn't actually writing. I was not an art director. That was not my path. But partnering with those folks and being able to smooth the waters ahead of them was really what I kind of got off on, to be honest with you. And it continues to be to this day, whether I am, was account coordinator back in the day, or CEO now. I want to lead people who want to solve problems through creativity. And I find that I understand the difference between a creatively led agency and an account led agency. That I have had multiple experiences in my career, and they have each taught me different things. I have, when I worked at Spike DDB, it was the first time, and I had been in the business at that point well over 10 years, but it was the first time that I had worked with predominantly people of color. I started my career at Y&R. I worked at a couple of agencies after that. I went client side for a little bit. And I was usually the one of one in rooms. So it was the first time that I was not in that kind of situation. But it was also the first time, more importantly, that I was working in an environment where people were living and breathing the culture. They were exposed and interested in creativity from an advertising standpoint, where they were not necessarily musicians, but they were going out and going to experience music. They weren't all artists, but they were art collectors. They went to museums. They were absorbing. They weren't just in the culture because of skin tone. They were in the culture because that is how they were living and experiencing the world. And that was it was an eye opener for me. After leaving Spike, I went to BBDO. BBDO was a very different environment. And again, in many meetings, I was once again one of one. But what I valued about the experience, and the reason why I was there for 7 years and then left and came back again, is because it is an organization that in every element of what they do, it is focused on creativity. It is focused on how to make the work better, how to make the work more creative, how to make sure that it's equally as effective for our clients. And I had never been in that kind of situation before. And I got to see how operationally, it's not just about what's happening in the creative department. It is about what's happening operationally throughout the entire company that is supporting the advancement of that creativity. And that for me was a game changer. And it really, has informed every other step that I have made in my career. And from every experience, you have the good things that you learn and things that you're like, yeah, I won't be taking that with me. So there was a little bit of that, but I wanted to fuse those two things. How do I fuse people who are living and breathing the culture and diverse group of people with people who are wholly focused on the work? And that's what I built. With the leadership at the previous company that I worked at, 3A Wildcard 3AM, where I also learned how to be much more entrepreneurial, how to make decisions, quickly, and how to pivot when necessary. And I brought those three kind of seminal experiences with me to this opportunity at Burrell.
Wow. How would you say that the agency world has changed since you stepped in? I mean, technology has changed a lot in terms of how we engage with media, how we respond to brands. And so what would you say have been some of the biggest changes? And what is your vision for what you can bring to Burrell to take Burrell into the future?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest changes is just that the medium, right? The ways in which we can express creativity have just exploded. When I first started, it was very traditional. You learned how to work in TV, print, and radio, and that was pretty much it. I was very curious about other platforms as they started to develop. So I went to a mobile marketing agency and was the voice of 365 Days of Elvis for a year. If you ever ask me anything about Elvis, I can tell you more information than you ever want to know. But it was my opportunity to get involved in mobile, launched the first Grammy mobile programs for Vibe and Spin magazine. They don't even exist now, anymore. So a lot has changed. The platforms have changed. The creative opportunities have changed. There really was an opportunity for long form, storytelling when I first started. So I think just the level of creativity and the expectation of the creative, I think has really changed in a very positive way. I think advertising is much less formulaic. It is much more about emotional engagement and how do we really connect with people and move them to action. And so that I think is a humongous change. The other obvious change is the fact that the skin color of the people that are working in these agencies have also changed. I have benefited from the mad dash to buy big general, quote unquote, and I will use that term loosely, general market agencies, that panic that we don't have any people of color working here. And so I've been a beneficiary of that and, was hired not just because I was smart, not just because I had a good pedigree, but also because I was Black. And I'm very much aware of that. And, you can see it when you walk in the first day and there's no one else that looks like you. You know why you're there. And, you got to show up and show out. And that's what I chose to do. And so now I go into a lot of those same rooms and I don't see, there are multiple people that look like me. I think that Burrell has suffered in the past because where are you finding these people that have grown up in this business? You're finding them from, Black and multicultural agencies. And so there's been a lot of poaching of fantastic talent from agencies like Burrell that want to go into a bigger market. They want to, get paid maybe a ton more money, and to work at general market agencies and get to work on bigger projects. And I understand it. And so that has been a big shift in, Burrell was considered a beacon for Black folks who were interested in this business and wanted to do great work. And now those same folks are having those opportunities at other places. We have competition. And that means that we've got to start to think differently. We've got to organize ourselves differently so we are competitive and can continue to get our fair share, more than our fair share, of Black and brown talent.
Yeah. A lot of people don't know that Eddie Murphy's Boomerang was based loosely off of the Burrell agency. And I'm old enough to remember the discussions when folks said, well, that's not real, right? Like that's not a real story. But Burrell did inspire the opening of a number of Black agencies. Mm-hmm. And now Burrell is one of the few that's actually still standing. And so how important is it for, and you talked a lot about like you being the only person in the room, but why is it so important for a Burrell to exist, for a Black owned agency to still exist in this environment today?
Yeah. I think that the level of insight and expertise in the Black audience is unmatched at Burrell. I don't think anyone, whether it's a general market agency that has a Black strategist, or the multicultural agencies that have kind of sprung up. There's in having experienced this team and the work that this team is putting out in the storytelling that they are engaged in. I really think that the level of understanding of the Black audience is unmatched at Burrell. Why that is important is because Black folks lead culture. And so we are the most creative. And that is not just us talking to ourselves. Right. When you ask white folks, 67% around there, will say that, yeah, Black people kind of spark culture. Same with Hispanic. The number is well over 50% of Hispanics also believe that Black people start and spark culture. And so understanding Black audiences, whether you are targeting them directly or not, helps you understand culture and where culture is going to move and where culture is going to shift, because where it's going to be a year from now is what's already happening now in the Black community. And so I think that that part of our story is undervalued. And so there is this belief that as a Black agency, you can't work on a general market client. It's like, no, absolutely you can, because our culture is changing. It is no longer, white and other is the masses at this point. Other is general market. And so understanding Black audiences leads to understanding of the quote unquote general market.
I think it's interesting that you said whether or not you're targeting minority audiences, you should be understanding Black culture. Yes. I haven't heard many people say that.
Yeah. I mean, if I can't even, there's so many things, and we kind of started like making a running list of, whether it was phrases or you look at the proliferation of Black creators on TikTok, like right. It is, the things that are moving in culture. There's someone, when I said this, someone gave as a counterpoint was, well, what about in music? I mean, reggaeton is the biggest, music out there, and that's not Black. And I'm like,
yes, it is.
Let's actually talk about the origin of reggaeton. I love reggaeton, but was started in the Black community. And so it is across the spectrum. It is not just something, a story that I'm kind of just telling myself to help me sleep at night. it's proven. And so, I do think that in order to understand culture, whether that is, Black, brown, white culture, especially youth culture nowadays, right. You have to, it starts with understanding what Black folks are doing, what they're thinking, how we're feeling. And so we're spending a lot of time in investment in understanding the Black audience, understanding the intersectionality that exists within youth audiences. And so that's, for us, I think that's the kind of starting place for the evolution of Burrell, is really being able to tell that story and ensuring that, for us, it starts with data, it starts with strategy, and then the work and everything else we do follows from there.
Right. You mentioned storytelling a lot. And when I'm talking to small businesses, I hear them using the word a lot. They don't quite understand what it means. But what advice would you give to young entrepreneurs, or when I say young people who are starting businesses, in terms of the importance of storytelling and what that really means?
Yeah, it starts with understanding your brand. If whatever your company is a brand. You are a brand. And, I've done work in brand building work for lots of brands. I've also done it for myself, in understanding kind of what my brand values are, what my behavior code is, where how I want to position myself, what my short-term goals are, my long-term goals are. Those are all things that you do when you're building a brand, right? So, and we can do that for ourselves, we can do that for our companies, but the story starts from there. you can't really jump into storytelling without understanding the story that you need to tell, and the message that you want to communicate. It's all marketing, whether you're in the marketing department or not. And so that's where that would be my suggestion for any entrepreneur, small business, person that's starting a small business, is to spend some time on that foundational work, on understanding who you want to be, what you want your company to be, what you want the mission is, what is the value that you are providing to your target audience? Do you understand who they are and what they believe? And once you have all of those foundational kind of questions answered, then I think you've got the beginnings of a story.
Right. Tell us a little bit about, or talk to us a little bit about immersion. I listened to you on that presentation, and I thought that was fascinating, because you were saying that is really the direction of branding. And so companies are really going to they can't really be static. They have to really figure out how to bring in and engage audiences very differently than they were required to do before.
So I spent the last 5 years in entertainment and entertainment marketing, working on a company called Wildcard 3AM, where we spent a lot of time, energy, and investment in understanding this concept of world building. And a key to that was this idea of immersion. That, again, the landscape, the marketing landscape has changed dramatically since it was TV, print, and radio. And the expectation now for audiences, for consumers, is to really be immersed in a brand's story. They don't just want to have messages shouted at them. They actually want to feel like they can experience it. And now, because of the advancements in technology, they're able to do that. And there are multiple levels of immersion. And so I just think that no one is looking for a transactional relationship with a brand now. They want the brand to prove to them that they believe in the same things that they believe in. They want to be immersed in the brand's values and understanding. I think that it has the increase in experiential marketing, in PR and events to help communicate a brand story and to make the brand story feel tangible to people, are all signs that immersion is what the goal is. Immersion can be measured by level of engagement. It can also be measured by level of, increased affinity. But that's the ultimate goal, is to really feel like you are, immersed in the world of a brand, and that brand world is not just existing in advertising; it's existing in IRL. It's existing on your phones. It's a multi-pronged approach, and it's not just creation of television advertising in the way that it was 20 years ago.
Yeah. What advice would you offer to small businesses who are looking to align themselves with brand? I talk to salespeople all the time who are frustrated with folks who just don't understand either the process or understanding the brand that they would like to align with. So they may be a small business, but they would really like to align with a Coca-Cola, or they'd like to align with a Nike, or they'd like to do a partnership with a major hotel. Mm-hmm. And so what would you say to smaller entrepreneurs who are building their own brands, right, in terms of what they should think about when they want to connect with these larger brands?
Well, I think brand alignment, again, if you've done the foundational work on understanding your brand, what your brand values are, what your mission is, I think that a lot of folks initially, especially when starting out, are just looking for the big brand, and those kinds of adjacencies, whether the values are aligned or not. And I get it. You're looking for scale and broader opportunities. That makes, it makes sense. But targeted opportunities with aligned brand values, I think are more valuable, because you're actually reaching consumers in a mindset that is consistent with where you want to go as a company. So I would say that it's not about the kind of the bigger, the better. It is really about aligning, brand values, brand behavior, brand beliefs. And that's how you should be using that, more using your conscience as your guide in how to pick brand adjacencies and brand partnerships.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is how you've been able to maintain balance. I noticed that you talked about your family and being able to be present is a priority of yours, and it's very important. And although you've been able to do tremendous work in the professional space, like I mentioned, you've won many awards. You are now the CEO of an historic agency. But what you do personally and how you maintain your personal life is also very important to you. And what we find with a lot of entrepreneurs is that they do lack balance. I've talked to a lot of people who are either frustrated or those who are in retrospect, right, looking at the things that they missed, right. With their family members or with their kids. And talk to us a little bit about how you've been able to maintain that, why it's important to you, and why you even lead with that when you make your presentations.
Yeah. I don't know if my kids would say I'm always present, but it is important to me. And I would say that there are two major moments in my life that impacted how or what balance actually means to me, how I would define balance. The first is, I love to work. I enjoy, or I love to work at a job that I feel I can make an impact on. I feel that I'm working with a team that I enjoy spending time with, and that I feel like we have a higher mission. So those are kind of the criterias for me to even be in a kind of work environment that's going to take me away from the other important things in my life. So once I've got that, I love actually working and engaging. And this has by far been the best 2 months of my life. That said, balance, whatever that means, balance for me is extremely important. And like I said, there are two major points in my life where it kind of changed how I behaved. The first one was I was divorced from the father of my children, and I realized that I needed to prioritize them at that point in a way that I had not. As a mom, I always felt like I was prioritizing my children, but prioritizing them over my career. I needed to work because they needed to eat. So I couldn't just not work. But my career and forward motion in my career had to take a back seat in order for me to ensure that they were going to be okay. And that was my top priority. And so balance became cooking 3 meals on the weekends, 3 full-on dinners on the weekends, so that when I got home from work, we could sit and have dinner together every single night. And we did. We sat around the dinner table. It was no TVs, no phones, and just sat and talked to each other. I was out of the office at 5:30 every day. When I went to BBDO and I interviewed for the role, it was with a client that was based in California. I told them I couldn't do it. And, I said, I'm a newly divorced mom and that's just not going to work for me. I'd love to be here. And they called me back and said, well, what about working on HBO? And I was like,
that works.
Yay. They talk about telling somebody what you need and then being rewarded for it, And so I would leave the office at 5:30 and go run and pick up my kids from aftercare. And then we'd sit down and have dinner together. I'd do bath time. And then I would work until, once they got to bed, I'm working from like 8:30 until midnight every night. I have been blessed to have a phenomenally supportive family. My parents would come up, and when I had to travel, I've have a village of, aunties and Miss this and Mr. that would come in, babysit or spend the night if I had to fly out early in the morning. But I made sure that I was having dinner with my kids 5-6 nights a week, most weeks. And so that was a balance then at that time. The second time that balance kind of really came up in my life was my dad passed away about 1.5 years ago. And it just, you go to the funeral of a parent and not one person there is talking about work.
Right.
They're not talking about how this person made an impact on them because they worked together or did whatever. It was about the way he lived his life, and how he touched them in that way. And so that to me was a realization that how I show up outside of work is how I want to show up at work. I want to, the way I'm making an impact on people in my life, hopefully outside of work, I want to be able to do that inside of a work environment. That's the kind of leader I want to be. But also it's not, we're not curing cancer and right. Where, it's not brain surgery. It should be fun. And so I took some time off before starting this role. I kind of reconnected with myself. I started meditating. I started kind of creating new habits that enable me to find a renewed sense of balance in this new role. So those are practices that I was off for 3 months. There were practices that I did every day. I journaled. And these are, behaviors that I still kind of do now, even though I have an extremely busy job. And Ron has heard me say, other people in the office have heard me say, I've been on 17 planes in the last 2 months, 8 different cities, but I get up and I go to the gym. I meditate. I, journal at least a couple of times a week. And those are the things that kind of keep me sane and enable me to kind of approach things with an open heart and an open mind.
Wow, so important. Thank you for that. Yeah. You are now creating the legacy for your own legacy, your personal legacy for Burrell. And so what would you like that to look like when you are leaving this agency?
Yeah. There's all of the kind of practical stuff, right? I want the agency to be bigger. I want us to have more clients. I want us to be kind of triple, quadruple, not necessarily the size, but certainly the impact. Right. But I also want people to feel like they've elevated themselves and are doing the best work that they've ever done in their lives. I want everyone, from the folks in finance to strategy to, IT, to account management, to feel like they are doing the best work of their career, and that they're also changing the game. I want our narrative to be that it starts with Black for us. Mm-hmm. It doesn't end there, but it definitely starts there. And I think that, 52 years ago, when Burrell first started, it started and ended with Black. Now we still start with Black, but we know that that is just the beginning or the spark that ignites culture. And so that's the legacy that I want to leave. I want other people to be repeating that, message back to me. And so, yeah, I just think that I want us to be proud. I want us to, as a Black agency, to recognize that we are all at this agency by choice. It's not because we're not as good as other folks that are, and general market agencies. There's no inferiority complex coming to work at Burrell. That you are expected to, achieve and strive and do phenomenal work in the same way you would if you were working anyplace else. And so, yeah, I want there to be a renewed sense of pride in being there. and pride in the agency, pride in the work that you're doing, and pride in our culture.
Sounds good. And you are the perfect person, as I said before, to lead them in that direction. We are so excited for you, Tara. We will be watching your moves and cheering you on, and looking forward to having you back as you are more rooted in the position and executing a new thing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. It's phenomenal to meet you. And I hope it's the first of many conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we thank you all for listening and tuning in. We'll be back again next week with another dynamic guest. Take care.
The Business First podcast is hosted and produced by Sonia Aline. Executive producer Ken Johnson. Find the Business First podcast on Apple Podcast, Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, TuneIn, or wherever you get your podcast. On social media on IG at business_first_podcast. Follow the Mean Old Line Media Podcast Network on IG at Mean Old Line Media. Get the Mean Old Line Media app in the App Store or Google Play. The Business First podcast is a Mean Old Line Media production.